Welcome, everyone, to episode 51 of the Rugby League Coach podcast. We've just had a delightful conversation on air about who would survive in the wild longer, myself or Lee Addison, and I'm going to leave those gruesome details up to the listener or the viewer, which way you look at the podcast or consume the podcast, to decide who would have come out on top in that one. In episode 51 of the Rugby League Coach podcast, we're going to go over a variety of topics. First, we're going to introduce everyone that's on the screen right now. We've got James Varley, who's clocking in from the UK, who's currently to the bottom of my screen as I see it. Brendan Rose to the left of him. And then, of course, up top, Lee Addison from rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. And Lee, we have to address the big scenario in the room. You're a bit too big time for us now after your appearance on the Today Show.
Very true.
Yes.
So speak to my agent.
Yeah. So we very much do need to speak to your agent. There was a good piece walking through the sheds, and here's Darius Boyd, and they're having a chat, and they're finding out what the players would be feeling on the morning of Origin, and then they start focusing and shining a light on the juniors, rugby league juniors, and where it all starts. And they had the expert opinion and analysis from Mr. Lee Addison from rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. So how good was that?
Yeah, it was good, and I predicted that would be in the winning changing rooms, much to the chagrin of the presenter Alex, who had his blue scarf on.
He did have his blue scarf on. It was a bad day for that young man. In fact, you're wearing the only light blue coloured Puma jersey that's had any sort of success there lately with your Man City jumper on.
I've got another City jumper on this week. I've been wearing them every week since City won the treble, just to wind Rosie up. So,
how good. Well, listen, we do want to, before we get into the topics for today, we do want to have a quick shout out to Special Ops Socials. Special Ops Socials is the chief sponsor of this podcast, and they support us, so support them. Special Ops Socials. Now, Lee, let's dive straight into breaking news that happened today. It really came from left field. If you had to put a short list of coaches in the NRL in trouble, you might have had Justin Holbrook there, but you might not have. But today, he's officially been told that he will not be there next year as the head coach, and they have signed Des Hasler. What are your initial thoughts on this appointment of Hasler and, well, the immediate and unsuspected sacking, the culling? There was blood everywhere on the walls at Titans HQ of Justin Holbrook.
Well, after waking up this morning, I then went for another little snooze a few hours later, because I've been up watching the cricket a lot this week, so my sleep's been a bit sleep deprived. I've got a mate down in Sydney who doesn't really like Des Hasler because he's a big Bulldogs fan, doesn't in his head like what Des did to the club. So knowing that I've worked under Des, he always messages me about Des and this, that, and the other. He's messaging me about something this morning while I'm half asleep. And then he writes, Hasler. And I replied, what? Question mark. That gives you an idea of how, I just thought he was throwing him up as a New South Wales coach or something. I thought, I'll just Google Des Hasler, see what's happened. I literally thought it was April Fool's Day. So, first of all, who would want to work at a club where they work for 10 days behind your back, don't even give you a game or two to prove yourself, anything like that, and then just punt you after a win? Who would want to work at a club like that? I mean, you could argue it's the right of any business owners or whatever to sack who they want, when they want, how they want. But, why would you fancy that? Secondly, I don't think the Titans realise what they've done, in the sense that Des, anybody who knows anything about rugby league knows the Titans. It's not the coach's fault always when the Titans don't make the 8. There's a lot of things underlying at that club that happen because it's still a young club. One of them is the fact that they had a director of culture or whatever it was who was on telly half the time when they were playing. Well, apparently they went over his head as well to appoint him. But Des is going to find so many things wrong at that place. And he's notorious for spending money. Have the Titans got that money? And part of me wonders if Kieran Foran might have had a role in this, because he's always lent back towards Des. I literally can't believe it. I still can't believe it. Now it's a few hours since it's come into play. And to sack Holbrook now, and Des isn't coming until November 2024, I mean, what are they trying to achieve?
Who is coaching them?
Well, that's the other thing they don't know. And the Titans won the other day, and they're in 9th. And level on points with the team in 8th.
So I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. I'm just going to throw this out to the group. Rosie, Varley, feel free to jump in. It feels like only a month ago we'd had our probably 6th conversation about the Dragons in a row here on the Rugby League Coach podcast, and I made the comment they just need to rip the Band-Aid off and do something. Do you think the Titans have seen the circus around the Dragons, how it's derailed their season, all the questions about their coach, and they thought, we don't want any part of that. We're just going to make the decision to sack him, get a replacement, done, move on. Do you think that's why they've done what they've done here today?
No. I think they were genuinely worried about the amount of quality coaches out there. They want an experienced coach moving forward and they said, oh no, we better do it now because there might be no one left. Because there's literally 2 coaches left, Maguire, and up until 12 hours ago, there was 2 coaches left. And I think they've just gone, we need to get one of them. We'll have Des. Let's go.
Who's the others?
Oh, just Des and Maguire.
Oh, yeah.
They're certainly the most experienced coaches on the market, aren't they?
Because Flano's gone off the list, you mean?
Yeah, because Flano.
That's not a bad shout, actually, Rosie. Yeah, you might be right.
And what happened 10 days ago?
That's when the negotiation started, apparently, secretly.
So that was when Riles said, no, I don't want the job, pretty close to, and they started talking Flanagan, they started talking Des Hasler, and then they've probably gone to Flanagan. Flanagan's gone, I'm happy living in Cronulla, because he'll live in Cronulla and coach at Cogra. And then, so I reckon that was around that time where they've started to go, okay, we want this type of coach who's got experience, premiership winning coach, and they're the only 3 left.
But I've looked at the points difference, because weren't they talking about sacking Holbrook because of the defence? And the points difference isn't actually that bad. I'm just looking at it on here.
Yeah,
so it's very harsh.
The official comment from the club was that there were KPIs put in motion in the preseason, in the off season, that obviously were discussed and agreed upon in the off season between the club and Justin Holbrook. Those were not met. Hence, that's the grounds for moving forward and moving on.
See, even that's a joke, because the season ain't over.
The season's not over, nor is it close. It's, as you said, they're right in the mix of running with the Bulls at the moment. And to be fair, this year's NRL competition has been tighter than any competition from my recent memory. I know I'm only a young bull, but from my recent memory, it's one of the closest.
You know the reason though, it's because of these bye rounds. So whenever you look at anybody's place in the ladder now, have a look at how many byes they've had.
The Titans have only had one.
Because Titans are in 9th.
Yep.
And I think, what did you say, Rosa? They've only had 1 bye?
I think they've only...
Or is it Parramatta that have only had 1 bye? Anyway, one of the two in that position, 8th and 9th, has got 2 more byes to come. And this is the problem. You look at the ladder and you go, I'm getting it up now while we talk. They're doing well.
They've had 3 byes.
You have to look at the byes. Who's had 3 byes?
The Titans.
Oh, so Rosa was nowhere near. So
there you go.
And it's Para that have had 1.
Oh, okay, that's probably right. But also too is, imagine if the Titans sacked him and said you can finish the year out, and then they end up making the 8 and they do all right. Because I think if you only looked at the first half, they would be first or second. So they can play good footy. The issue is, for some reason, they can't play 80 minutes. I don't think, whether that's a coaching thing or player thing, I don't know. But I think the board's gotten rid of him, totally out, because they don't want to end up with egg on their face come September and Titans do all right, they make the 8. And you know what I mean? So
I think on one hand we criticised the Dragons for how they did it, and now I've criticised the Titans by how they did it. Maybe you can't avoid criticism with this kind of stuff. Maybe that's the way to go. Just make your decision, get on with it. They've made the decision, so now they have to get on with it.
Well, they can't avoid criticism when it comes to how they've done it with Justin Holbrook, whether it's drawn out, short and sharp. This is how it is done. What they can cop criticism for is the involvement of Mal Meninga in that club. What's he getting a paycheck for if they're not even going to be calling him and discussing things with him? I thought Mal Meninga actually handled this quite well. He came on the Sports Entertainment Network this morning, SEN, which is a very, very popular rugby league radio show. And he said that he had absolutely no knowledge of this. He felt sorry for Justin Holbrook, and that now his future at the club is he doesn't want to be there anymore if they're not going to consult him and have a chat with him or talk to him about things that are happening at that club. I think that was the absolute right way to go about it. And he put the club on blast, really, for what they've done. What were your thoughts about those interactions between I believe he's a paid club mentor or football advisor. So that interaction between football advisor board and the media league, I thought maybe I could get your opinions on what you thought about that.
Again, why would you want to work for that joint? There might be a lot of things that we don't know. There might have been a fallout. There's always something else to it. But let's look at it. Mal Meninga isn't consulted, so he goes on radio and says, I wasn't consulted, tells the world he wasn't consulted. So he's airing the dirty laundry of the organisation in public. Honestly, what kind of stuff is going on in Rabina? It's another schmozzle. It's a different kind of schmozzle to all the other schmozzles we talk about. Because Titans really don't have runs on the board. I'm sure I saw a quote today that said, I think somebody at the club saying, looking forward to bring success again. When has that club ever had success?
Yeah, what's their history of success? What's the average position of finish in NRL?
I think the furthest they've ever gone is the second week of the finals. Correct me if I'm wrong there. I don't believe they've ever made a grand final.
I think John Cartwright took them the furthest, didn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right. It might have been the second week of finals. I don't think they've ever gotten to a prelim.
And then a couple of years ago, they rolled the Roosters, didn't they, in a semi-final?
No, the Roosters rolled them on the...
no, they didn't roll them. They scraped home, sorry,
yeah.
Nearly rolled the Roosters.
They nearly did. And I believe it was a missed... Patrick Herbert had a chance to draw and pass and chose to dummy and got tackled, and that was the end of the game. I remember thinking, such a selfish move. But anyway, regardless, I don't want to crucify Patrick for something that happened through.
COVID, wasn't it?
Could have been, yes, during that COVID year.
Yeah. But mum and dad are huge Titans supporters. And the club is really good to its members and they sort of give them the heads up on what's happening. It might only be half an hour or whatever it is before it comes out to the media, but this whole behind the scenes, none of the players would know. What's going to happen this weekend is Brisbane's either going to put a cricket score on them or they're just going to come out galvanised. But the players really stuck behind Holbrook. I think this year could be just gone.
I really don't understand the timing of it. By all means, sign up Des. Say that Des is going to be the coach next year. Tell Holbrook what you're doing. Yeah, if they make the finals, but they're never going to win the Cobb.
And I read someone today, the CEO come out and goes to Holbrook, you got a minute? I just want to have a chat.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, wow. Need more than a minute to try and process that sort of information. So,
and then Holbrook said I could have argued, but I was flogging a dead horse, pretty much.
Somebody on Facebook wrote to me, Lee, do you want to be Desi's assistant? And I wrote in return, I'd rather die. And there's a million reasons for that. Number one, I don't want to be Desi's assistant. Number two, who would want to work in a club like that?
But could you imagine Desi and Mel working together?
No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Especially after what Mal said today.
Yeah, well, Mal's written his own public resignation, hasn't he?
Yeah,
it's a public resignation. That it's just an acknowledgement that I don't think I'll be working with this club any longer. And if anything, he just gave the Titans a heads up that there's an email coming very shortly with Mal Meninga's resignation and signature.
I want to know what Gordy says on Monday night on NRL 360, because all he's been saying the last few weeks is we're a loyal club, we won't sack him. And then maybe they haven't talked to their ambassadors as well.
Yeah, sounds said very much so. And can I say that the Titans board is starting to sound like it's problematic. And I know I've certainly said over the last year or so of doing this podcast is that the clubs that are struggling, dwindling down the bottom of the ladder and have a history of sacking and getting rid of coaches and players are the Tigers, the Titans and the Dragons, and they need to start looking at their board. Well, I think this might be another cause for them to start having a look at the top of the tree rather than the roots. Lee, I think we've pretty much covered the Justin Holbrook waking up without a job situation. Do we want to move on to Origin 2?
Yeah, why not?
Let's get some of your original thoughts on the game. I know when the Around the Town with Taylor Brown podcast, you are quite muzzled in the fact that you do host, but you certainly let your opinion known that you thought the New South Wales attack and the way they game was quite pedestrian, wasn't it?
Yeah, so what I see, New South Wales get down the field quite easy. I see that New South Wales tend to win the field position battle quite well against Queensland. When they get into the good ball areas, for those who don't know what good ball is, it is the opposition 30 or 40, depending on how you want to define it. I used to define it as the whole half, but there you go. That they just can't execute. And I think that's for a number of reasons. I think it's because they've been trying to use a Penrith system, but without Penrith's meat on the bones. They've got different meat on the bones. They've got the Penrith skeleton with different meat on the bones. And somebody like Yo ends up trying to play as a pivot, and I don't think his passing game is fantastic, to be honest. He's definitely not got a great short passing game in good ball. He's got a decent long passing game, but, why the halves can't do that, I don't know. And what that does is it takes him away from the running role, and Queensland have been attributed to having a really good slide defence. But Yo, plus the other props who aren't getting rested very much and rotated very well, aren't really doing their job in good ball to arrest the defensive slide or be an option to run and score some tries. I also don't think some of the forwards are running direct enough. I think they're running some really strange lines. And they're just not getting over the line. Literally. Also, Jerome Luai does this silly line where he sort of turns back on himself. If he can't get around, he turns back on himself. He might be able to do that in a World Cup against jagged defences or against some NRL defences. He's not going to do that in Origin against a hungry Queensland team. And I think our man Teddy, literally needs to go back to really just keeping it basic, just running the football as hard as he can at times, and then put some of the detail in afterwards, because I think he's trying to play a little bit of a pivotal role too, and it's just too many cooks are spoiling the broth. It didn't help that Damien Cook was in the centres yesterday, because why would you give Damien Cook early ball on a shift? It's just, one-on-one against the opposition centre, unless he runs past him, it's not going to beat him, is he? So, look, I think they're a rudderless ship. I thought the way the whole prep, Freddie's good at doing his little gimmicks, his earthing, he's walking arm in arm and all this. But the other thing about coaching is when the opposition have picked you, you've got to come up with something different. And him and his coaches never came up with that. I think his time's done. And well done, Queensland. They keep it really simple. Queensland. And they put their energy in and they put their selections into people who can run hard, tackle hard, and work for each other. It's not rocket science. And Billy's, to his credit, Billy has held it together really well. There's nothing tactically special about Queensland at all. If anything, there's a lot they can improve on, but it doesn't matter.
I was about to ask that, Lee, because they don't seem tactically spectacular, can I say, in the way that they play, and they don't have these, over the top lairish plays. They just run hard and tackle hard. But one thing that is a shining light between both sides is they look very underprepared. The Blues look very underprepared in terms of the minor details in the game compared to the Maroons, who look like they do have little keynotes they're getting from the opposition. So what sort of tips is Billy Slater, do you think? They say he's one of the most prepared coaches in Origin. He studies every game prolifically. What sort of little things and tips could he be giving his players about the opposition without having a full game tactic laid out on the line?
I think it's things like, well, first of all, when you coach any rep, you've got to strip so much back. You know, you can't have a real intricate game plan or anything like that. And you've sometimes got to look at where the opposition have a weak defender. And I have no doubt that they were targeting Luai yesterday. So I think they were setting up on the left to shift to their right, to target Luai, playing and around there. And whoever Luai's centre and wing were at the start. So that was Crichton and Adokar. So by switching his wings, they've actually put two wings out of position, haven't they? Right? So or out of natural position. Imagine being Queensland and you're targeting Luai's edge, then all of a sudden they put Damien Cook there too, who's not a tall person. It was manna from heaven. And the game was actually won at that point. The scoreboard pressure, as soon as them two got put together, they were running over them, they scored a couple of tries. The scoreboard pressure was applied, and that was it. It was almost game over at halftime.
But in the second half, the other edge defended pretty ordinary as well. Crichton got stopped 3 times by the hammer. You know, so it wasn't just like, I'll be honest. I think Cookie should finish the game with his head held high. You know?
I agree. But when he's defending in the middle, he gets protected by big forwards.
Yeah.
Even I don't care how good a defender you are. If you're small, sometimes you're going to get overrun. If you get your timing slightly off, you're going to be overrun. You know, some of the best defenders have been little men, but they sometimes do get overrun. It just happens sometimes. Damien Cook didn't really miss any tackles yesterday, but what did happen was he got knocked backwards and offloads got off him. And then the other thing is, I think New South Wales needed to attack more in the middle chunk of the field. And by the middle chunk, I've said this before, and I remember Brendan misinterpreted which way I meant on the field. I mean, as you're looking down the camera, the middle field from your own 30-metre line to the opposition 30-metre line. I think New South Wales have to attack more there. Because when they're down their other end, Queensland are obviously Queenslander mentality about defending their own line, but you've had some execution problems. So if you can shock Queensland in that middle chunk of the field, that then puts them on the back foot, and then they're the ones chasing you rather than the other way around. Because New South Wales do not have a problem marching up the field when they play straight and direct. They have no problem. So, mate, Freddie for me, really poor tactically. He's been shown up. Time to go.
But there was also times when...
Sorry, Brendan.
You go, mate.
Yeah, an observation that I made, whenever New South Wales spread out wide, we were just totally snuffed out by the Queensland wingers coming up in the faces. I've never seen a team so...
Because it was readable. Because
Yeah.
Because there was nothing to suggest anything else was happening.
Yeah,
which is what I'm saying about the middlemen and the decoy runners and whatnot.
I'd almost go as far to say it was just too slow. One thing that Queensland had oodles of was just blistering pace. The Hammer has just got this blistering pace. Valentine Holmes on the other side. They've got wingers, and Reece Walsh is he's absolutely outstanding. The way he can turn on a dime. So when the New South Wales add their third man in with the O, he's plotting to the line, then getting it out the back to Moses and Luai, who are kind of plotters as well. And then they're hoping Tedesco can bring the speed on the end of it. Well, Queensland are just going half straight to fullback in Reece Walsh, who's got oodles of speed, and then they have the Hammer and all these sorts of plays. So they just were faster, quicker. They got it to those.
I think the selection of Tommy Turbo has been really flawed too. He wasn't fit for game one, and he's obviously only sort of getting back to fitness, and then he does his pec. I mean, that incident where he did his pec. I mean, honestly, I'm wondering if the kid has got a future in the game because. It was pretty innocuous, really.
Yeah, there's something, and I feel sorry because he's one of the good guys of the game. There's definitely his body's a lot older than he is. I think I don't know.
It's not like he was chicken winged, is it? He was making a tackle.
He sort of put his arm around Reece Walsh and that was it. But
not like he was putting his hands around Tino. Thingy me, Bob.
And the thing as well is a lot of these injuries that he's got a muscular sort of injuries.
They're all soft tissue injuries.
They're all soft tissue, muscular sort of injuries. And the reason why they do kilometers and kilometers in preseason, these NRL players, is not because they have to run kilometers in a game, but it builds resilience in the soft tissue and all those sorts of things. So maybe it just screams that he's been that inactive and they're wrapping him in cotton wool so much that he's actually becoming more prone to these sort of soft tissue muscular damages because they're too worried about him getting injured. And now we're just in this vicious cycle of Turbo injured, wrapped in cotton wool, comes back at full speed at his speed, gets injured, and then we're just going round and round again.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel sorry for the kid, you know.
I do.
Yeah.
He's a major cog in the wheel for Manly as well, isn't he? A really major cog. But didn't Cherry Evans play well yesterday as well, though? Manly.
He's like a
he is. I thought when you talk about running hard, Carrigan's offload to Cherry Evans in that first half was just a great hard run. And then Queensland spread it wide effectively off that play when
passing off instinct rather than premeditating it. That was
But
it was.
That was the difference between the two locks.
But New South Wales had opportunities for that. Like Payne Haas broke the line and had arms free, but no one was there. Paddy Carrigan breaks the line, has arm free, and he's got 2 people there.
Yeah, and what talk about a shining light for the Blues. Payne Haas was outstanding, I believe, last night. He was great. There's not much more he could have done. And honestly, the unearthing of Reece Robson didn't do anything wrong last night either. I thought he was very solid in defence and done a really good job tightening the ruck for the Blues. I thought that he was good there. I didn't
think his delivery was sensational though.
It wasn't as good as Damien Cook. No, it wasn't as good.
No.
But he certainly provided himself. Provided the Blues with an option.
When Harry Grant comes on, the difference he makes to Queensland is phenomenal.
They lift. They see him and lift.
You know who I'd like to see in a blue jersey? He wears blue jersey every week. Is Brayley from Cronulla.
I think Brayley's a good player for sure. It's not a bad shout, but I just think Damien Cook has to have the jersey for game 3. And look, there's a lot of time between now and next season. So I think Cook has the 9 jersey all but wrapped up for game 3. I wouldn't be surprised if they go with Robson and Cook again, to be completely honest. I think that's not a bad shout. And I just, now that the game's over, I just don't think Yuta Kamanu provided anything off that bench for New South Wales. He didn't bust the line. He didn't run with any sort of manic intent.
Why doesn't Regan Campbell-Gillard get a start now?
I don't understand. And look, Stefano, he's also a bit of a victim of playing for the Tigers in this next sentence I'm going to say. But he's won 12 starts out of his 48 NRL games so far. I know he's a 23-year-old prop and all these sorts of things, but he just doesn't have the wins on the board at Clubland. And you know, any player that's in a side like that, you struggle to make those choices for them. So
I've got a question for you, some Greg's boys.
Here we go.
What happens with Teddy moving forward? I genuinely think it needs to be looked at.
I think and I'm genuinely saying this not because I'm a Teddy fan, he's playing in a pretty average club side at the minute, and he's playing in an average Origin side at the minute. I have said before I probably would like the captaincy taken off him to help him, not to upset him. And I think he's got enough runs on the board. I really do. I don't think Billy Slater would have got sacked by Queensland for one losing series where he didn't play well. And I think he was New South Wales' biggest meter eater in general, I think, last night again. So
he didn't light the world on fire, absolutely not. But let me flip it the other way around. Who are you replacing him with that has anything that's better than what James Tedesco is representing? Dylan Edwards is very fit. He's a very good player for the Penrith Panthers. I'm not downgrading him at all. But if you want to go on defense, James Tedesco is one of the most brilliant defending fullbacks that we've seen. Some of the try savers he's pulled off have been miraculous over the past year alone. You know, he's the captain of our country for a reason. And defensively, the way he organises a defence, you can see it the way he talks. Now, you can't do absolutely everything from fullback. And yeah, sure, he hasn't been as dazzling as previous years, but I still think him at the moment is equal to a Dylan Edwards. And you know what? If Ryan Pappenhausen was fit, playing for the Storm and absolutely lighting the world on fire like he has in previous years, maybe I'd look at it a little bit more. but I'm still saying he's got the runs on the board over any current available fullback right now, and I can't see them getting rid of him, and to get rid of him would be folly.
And I'm not saying I'd go down this option, but for me, there's only one other option. They're struggling to score points in the red zone. I'd go Latrell Mitchell if I was going to change it, because I just think he would bring a little bit. He'd just bring more dimension in that red zone, and you just see when he plays for Souths and different. But you wouldn't get the same work ethic and defence that you're talking about.
You think more as a floating attacking threat, Brendan? Really?
Yeah.
Let's get Latrell to the field. He's 0-2 from side selected this year to getting to the actual field. So.
I still think there's something in that camp. I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel right. You know, I just don't know what it is.
All right, well, let's move on. As much as I love talking about how New South Wales really disappointed the world last night, we started uncovering a little bit of the Lee Addison story on last week's podcast. It was lots of fun going over where Lee had been, where he's going to, and what happened. And I believe we were just about up to chapter 4, Lee. I think
I can't remember. What's chapter 4?
I think chapter. Look, I'm going to apologise.
Was that Wigan, Lee? Was that Wigan?
No, we've definitely already gone over.
I know we've done the Wigan one
in Australia, isn't it? You just get to Australia.
I think this was the Manly chapter, if I'm being quite fair, to be honest, Lee.
We should have done that straight after Des Hasler's thingy, because Des Hasler was the coach at the time.
Des Hasler was the coach at the time. So you come over from England, you're here in Australia, and you find yourself at the Manly Sea Eagles League. Talk us through that appointment.
Well, I wrote, before I came over to England, from England, I wrote to every single club that existed in Rugby League, I think, saying, this Englishman wants to start. Can you give him a start somewhere? And basically, there was about 3 people that replied. And one of them was Christian Brothers in the Manly region. And when I got there, I did a couple of sessions, and little did I know, but I'd made a bit of created a bit of a stir, because, you know, there wasn't, you know, people were looking up to what I was doing, kind of thing. And Manly were alerted to it. And before I knew it, I was getting invited down, and I ended up just assisting the SG Ball. So they'd done their pre-season, and their season was just about to start. And the club asked me to help out.
Who was the coach?
A guy called Tony Clark. But in that side were people like Kieran Foran. What's his name? Darcy Lussick. I'm trying to think of others. I'll have a look while we think. But yeah, so I spent that year.
Union guy playing then too?
Who?
The Australian Rugby Union captain. Was he in that team? What's his name?
Who's that? Mike Hooper.
Yeah.
No, he never played. He never played at Manly Sea Eagles, mate.
Will Hopewadi, was Will Hopewadi?
No, he was in the Harold Matthews side that I had the year after. So that year he was playing. Harold Matthews a year young and still scoring about 3 tries a game. So
then the following year you take over as the Manly Sea Eagles Harold Matthews coach.
Yeah. And after 3 games, we were 0 from 3. And you know you're in trouble when Crusher Cleal, who's, you know, you didn't see that often, but he came and sat in the coaching box with me. We were playing Canberra in round 4. And anyway, leading up to the game, I remember Will Hopewadi. You know, Will later in his career didn't play on Sundays at times. Well, there was a doubt whether he was going to play on this particular Sunday, and we did everything we could to make sure he was playing. We got that over the line. My dad was over on a holiday, and whereas I'm exactly what I'm doing now, where I'm sort of leaning back, I'm, you know, wherever I can, I'm horizontal, just leaning back on something. My dad is the biggest stress head in history. So whenever I'm coaching a game, he just walks around the field constantly, chain smoking and panicking and whatever else. And anyway, I got in the coaching box eventually, and we're playing Canberra. And I could feel already I was probably coaching for my future. I'd only been there 3 games, so I've made this big decision to move to Australia, got my chance, and here I was. And Crusher was sat next to me. And Crusher doesn't sit next to you in the coaching box unless he's watching you to see what you like. Anyway, long story short, we won that game 60-odd something. Crusher was apparently really impressed by everything I did, including my halftime talk, the messages I sent down and whatnot. Gave me a really good review, and we didn't lose many games after that season or the year after. And the season the year after in the Harold Matthews was actually a record until recently, because Manly traditionally have always used their own juniors for Harold Matthews and SG Ball.
Mm.
And then in the last sort of decade, under the Fultons, they got more players from Western Sydney, which obviously strengthened them up significantly. But yeah, it was one of the better seasons. I think when they look back at the history, it'd be one of the top 5 seasons or something my second year. So but it all changed there. And I do remember as well, my permanent residency came through only a few days later. So my dad went home a really happy man because we beat Canberra on the Sunday. And then on the Thursday night, we beat Illawarra. So we'd gone from losing 3 to winning the next 2. And then the morning after, I checked my postbox and my permanent residency had come in. And then my dad was flying home that night, so he went home really happy. So all, in a week or so, everything just changed. And I never really looked back after that. But yeah, it was really interesting. I remember very early in my time at Manly too, I got in trouble for kissing a girl in public. In a pub, and I had a Manly Seagulls hat on, and I forgot because I was too drunk. I had a bucket hat on, so that got back to the club because I didn't realise. I mean, it's just like they call it the Insular Peninsula there. Word gets around. It's like a little village, so word got about. And another thing I did, like in England, you tend to just, if you need to spend a penny, you just whop it out and do it almost anywhere as long as nobody can see your tallywhacker. And I'm in the middle of the training field and I needed to spend a penny. And I hid behind a very big lamppost, floodlight, to do it. And I got a bollocking off Des for that. And so I was in all sorts of trouble. Because in England, people don't bother, do they, James? They're just, whereas here, they're a bit more precious about it, So I've always been careful since that day. So, I did my best to throw it away before I even started, really, but they stuck by me. It was good.
So they stick by you, and then you find yourself heading to the foot of the mountains there at Penrith, and what you describe as a period that exposed you to rugby league's politics like you'd never yet known in rugby league. Yeah.
So in one of the semi-finals that I coached the Sea Eagles side to, before the game, after the game, I was tapped on the shoulder by somebody at Penrith and saying, "We want you over at our place. You'll have to do an interview, but we want you over at our place." Anyway, I did an interview, and an interview that was meant to last, 30 minutes ended up being an hour and 20 or something. Matthew Elliott at one point kept saying, "I'm really enjoying listening to you," because of the things I was saying. It's since been said that he then went and asked for a full-time job for me. He gave me his phone number and said, "Keep in touch," basically. And I thought, I've surely got a job here. Anyway, a few days later, I got a call saying I hadn't. I went, okay. It was actually an email. So I called them and said, "Have you got any feedback for me?" They went, "No, Lee, you were brilliant." I rang Matt Elliott, and he basically said, without saying it, it didn't surprise him, and there's different forces operating. And I couldn't believe it. And then I happened to bump into 2 of the interview panel when I was helping coach a development side at Manly in the off season. And I said, same thing. I said, what's the goal? Why, and they said, "No, you did brilliantly. It's just one of those things." It turns out the chairman had poo-pooed it, basically. And I said, "Oh, would you let me coach the Western Sydney Academy of Sport to prove myself?" That's a half Penrith and half Parramatta thing. And they said, "Yeah, would you do that?" I went, "Yeah." So I ended up leaving. Des lost it with me. You're not allowed to leave Des's throws. He can go whenever he wants, but you're not allowed to leave Des. And I ended up moving over there and coaching over there. And then, but on that interview panel, because I got the Western Sydney Academy a job, there was a guy called Marty Bullock, who was the CEO of the Western Sydney Academy of Sport. So then when I'm doing the Western Sydney Academy of Sport, I approach the job just like I approach any job, and did all the preamble and the paperwork that I always do and all the preparation I always do. And Marty Bullock was privy to all this. And little did I know, because I didn't know anything, but there was he was on the board, a parent group, that were looking for a new coach of St. Gregory's College Rugby League. And I reckon we save that for the next one, mate, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
Looking at the time as well.
Looking at the time, yeah, of course, it's approaching. Yeah, well, it is getting a little bit further down the track of the evening, isn't it, Lee? But look, beautiful work. I am enjoying recanting your story here on the Rugby League Coach podcast, as I'm sure Brendan and James are as well. Probably parts of this story that Brendan and James aren't all privy to, and they may not be privy to the next bit. But yeah, obviously an enjoyable couple of seasons in your life, Lee, and it's been fun.
I'm doing a bit of traipsing around next week. So I'm going to suggest, boys, if you're okay, that we actually have a week off the Rugby League Coach podcast next week, of our first week off for a while. I don't know if you want to do that with Around the Town with Taylor Brown as well. I can host that, no problem. But I'm happy to give the Rugby League Coach one a week off, just because, it's not the easiest week logistically for me next week, and I'm sure we could all benefit from a breather a little bit, but I'm happy to do Around the Town with Taylor Brown, particularly as it's a new thing as well. So
honestly, Lee, I'm easy as, and I've got a pretty chock-a-block schedule next week, so that might fit in perfectly with Taylor Brown.
All right.
So we can get around to a few towns if we're being quite honest.
Yeah. All right.
So,
all right. Well,
so listen, Lee, before we stop, talk us through your Holiday Clinic Roadshow that's happening at the moment. There's been some heavy advertising on your page.
Bundaberg, Gympie, 2 venues in Logan, Rochdale and Chambers Flat, Mustangs. North Brisbane at Samford. Are you bringing your son?
Yeah, so I'm trying to get someone to take him out that day, to be honest.
Where do we go after that? Oh, yeah, Rochdale. And then Nanango near Kingaroy.
I do know Nanango, yeah.
Orange.
Ah, yes.
And Willumbar.
So you've got a jam-packed school holiday season coming up, Lee.
3 weeks of it.
3 weeks of Lee getting around a few towns, to be honest. Don't worry
around about the middle of that time, I might have some news.
Okay. All right. So yeah, keep your ears out and your eyes peeled on Lee's social media pages for that news again. And at the end of our podcast, I will thank Special Ops Socials for sponsoring this podcast here, the Rugby League Coach.com.au podcast. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, James. And we'll see you guys in a fortnight.